35. Dr. Keating concluded her report as follows. Open quote. 50-year-old man with minimal psychiatric history presents with escalating delusional ideation over several years, accompanied by some grandiosity, no other clear symptoms of psychosis or major mood disorder. Note, history of bowel CA with possible signs of recurrence 2 years ago. Need to exclude organic cause of current presentation. He acted on his delusional beliefs by making threats and disobeying legal directives under the belief they don't apply to him, which has caused harm in various domains in his life, particularly his relationships and his reputation, now leading to legal sanctions. Recent risk to self via hunger strike, however now eating and drinking. So Dr. Kanzu got involved within the first weeks of him being at Silverwater, after being fed all of this documented evidence from the court, from the police, from whoever would have been involved in handing him over to corrective services, and then Dr. Keating has a corrective services binder of documents. And it's in those documents that certain words are taken out that are planted there as word seeds that begin their history trail all the way up the chain. And we can see slowly as we go down the chain that this fabrication has occurred when it comes relative to the New South Wales police prosecutor or the Crown prosecution then attempting to use this bundled package of framed work in the courtroom. So we mentioned before that this report details a few things about two crowns, the act of supremacy, United Nations. It details notes about the use of the carriage service and the firearms offence, which is part of the reasoning for his being in jail, even though these charges didn't come to fruition in the end in the manner or respect that the police or the state wanted them to. A jail blaster has turned out to be a bit of a comical event with some very serious circumstances at the other end of it. And as we look backwards, we can see that those circumstances were sought for to undermine the very premise of raising a flag in honour of the Anzac, at which these state police sought to undermine, attempt to stop, and then be told by the court that we as a people have that curial right to recognise the gods of our fathers and a lineage and ancestry that brought us forward to this constitution which needs to be defended. So I'm not going to read through all of this, we'll move on to the next slide, but we can see that the moment that he's arrived in Silverwater jail, he is treated very much like a battery hen. And that's what they do there. That they work for private contracts and they go to their cells and they get minimal wage to buy things at 4 or 5 times the cost they are on the outside. So it's a literal money churning machine for the state of New South Wales. There are a lot of things wrong when the state uses the jail system as a money churning machine. This case and the experience that not only you has had but I've had as well can demonstrate very clearly that the state doesn't care about the initial correction or repair of someone as long as this machine keeps churning the dollars that come out the other end of it. 34. On 10 August 2020, the defendant was reviewed by staff specialist psychiatrist Dr. Keating. She was asked to see him in the context of a recent hunger strike and to examine whether he was psychotic. She noted the following. So this is this long-winded text that's taken out of this doctor's notes, which are very relevant to the action that has occurred, wherein they were actually warned very clearly that these rules apply and then went about not following them anyway. So we can see on this slide that there's a reference to the United Nations, there's a reference to a crown, there's a reference to a jurisdiction, there is a reference to a military occupation, and there is a reference to how one is being treated while in that jurisdictional knowledge. And then it is immediately assumed, this is August 2020, so June, July, August, we've got to this point where a staff specialist psychiatrist, Dr. Keating, has obviously made a decision to have him transferred from Silverwater out to Long Bay for forced treatment. 33. The defendant was referred to the Mental Health Review Tribunal shortly after his arrival in custody. In a report of 8 September 2020, the psychiatric registrar from Justice Health stated that the defendant had been referred to the Mental Health Screening Unit in the context of a deteriorating mental state. This downward slope of bad treatment that followed starts under a report 8 September by a staff specialist psychiatrist, Dr. Keating, wherein post that, receiving Dr. Kanzu, Registrar in Forensic Psychiatry, and 19 October, reviews the patient at Long Bay facilities. Observations regarding the defendant's mental health and the bases of the community treatment order. So they've tried to give some reasoning as to his beliefs being a threat to the community, when it's pretty realised that everything that's written down in this example is semi-what believed by the community anyway now. They can see the WEF, they can see the digital ID, they can see the lockdowns and the bio-warfare, they can see a lot of this stuff that has been a forced change on them, at which certain parties have called it a forced industrial revolution 4.0. And those certain parties have said a lot of things on a world stage that are relevant to the things that have happened on that world stage. So this is where we now moved from the defendant into the plaintiff, into the observations by medical treating staff, and now back into the evidence that forms the block of this request for an extended supervision order, which would allow the police to monitor you and therefore take him to hospital, force drug him for up to 3 years, and then restrict him from obviously using a phone, the internet, and those sort of things, so that he could speak to anybody about the conditions that he was being attempted to be put under.